I got the job at Mel's Diner 3 weeks after I moved out of my parents' house. It was a 24-hour place off Route 9 with cracked vinyl booths and a jukebox that hadn't worked since 2003. The pay was terrible, but they were willing to hire someone with literally zero experience. My first closing shift was on a Wednesday in late September. It started awful and got worse within a few hours. A trucker left a 5-cent tip on a $40 check. A woman threw her plate at me because I brought her scrambled eggs instead of hash browns, even though I had repeated her order back to her twice. And 2 guys in a corner booth kept making kissing sounds every time I walked past. By 11, I was counting down the minutes until midnight. My feet hurt. My apron was stained with ketchup and coffee, and I had already cried once in the walk-in freezer. That's when this guy walked in. He was maybe 32, dressed in a button-down shirt and clean jeans. He smiled when he sat down at the counter and asked how my night was going, and actually listened when I said it had been rough. He ordered a coffee and pie and left a $20 tip on an $8 check, and told me I seemed to be doing a good job despite everything. After the night I'd had, that kindness felt like oxygen. We talked while I wiped down tables. He said his name was Danny. He worked in sales and traveled a lot. He was passing through on his way to Albany. Danny was cheesy in places, but he was easy to talk to. Around 11:40, he asked if I wanted to grab a drink after my shift, said there was a bar still open a few miles down the road, and that I looked like I could use one after the night I'd had. I hesitated. My mom drilled it into me never to go anywhere with strange men, but Danny didn't feel like a stranger anymore. In fact, I was so comfortable around him that we might have been friends for a while, and I didn't want to go back to my empty apartment alone, sitting and replaying every awful moment of the shift. So I said yes. Danny smiled and said he'd wait outside. He told me he was driving a silver BMW that'd be parked near the road. The last customer left at 11:55. I helped the night cook Carlos finish closing, grabbed my jacket, and clocked out at 12:15. The parking lot was dark. The overhead lights had been busted for weeks, and nobody had bothered to fix them. I could see a silver car idling near the edge of the lot with its headlights off. I walked toward it. I was maybe 30 feet away when I felt somebody tug at my jacket from behind. I spun around to this shady-looking guy in a dark hoodie, grinning down at me. He was short but bulky. Most of his face was ducked under the hoodie, but I could see the yellow crooked teeth followed by a piercing on the upper lip. My heart started pounding. He leered at me as he stepped closer, gripping my arm so tightly his fingers dug into my flesh. He told me to be quiet, that we were just going for a ride. I looked toward the BMW. Danny was standing outside the driver's door now, watching. I screamed at him to come and help me. He didn't move. His face was flat, expressionless. My brain caught up. This was all planned. Danny was being nice to me, so I'd trust him and follow him outside alone. I screamed and dropped straight down, letting my weight go completely dead. The man wasn't expecting it. He stumbled forward and lost his grip on my arm for just a second. Without giving him time to recover, I stomped down hard on his foot with my heel and dashed straight for the diner. I pounded and screamed at the glass door with both fists until Carlos looked up from where he was mopping and rushed to unlock it. I shoved past him and told him to lock it again and to call the police. Through the window, I could see the BMW. Both men had already gotten in. The car backed up slowly, turned toward the exit, and drove away. Carlos called 911. I sat on the floor behind the counter with my knees pulled up to my chest, shaking so hard my teeth were chattering. 2 officers showed up 20 minutes later. They took my statement, checked the parking lot, and found nothing. One of them said the cameras outside hadn't worked in over a year. They asked what the man looked like. I realized I couldn't remember much except for an easy smile, brown hair, and an average-looking face. Danny looked so normal it was almost forgettable. Maybe that was the whole point. The officer said to keep an eye out, but without plates or a clear description, there wasn't much they could do. He asked if the man had said where he was from or where he was going. I remember him saying Albany, but then I wondered if anything he'd said was true. I quit the next day without even going back for my last paycheck. Carlos dropped it off at my apartment the following week. My mom wanted me to move back home. I told her I was fine, that it was just bad luck that I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. But I couldn't sleep in my apartment anymore. Every sound in the hallway makes me freeze. I got a new job a month later at a coffee shop that closed at 6. I only work day shifts now. I never walk to my car alone, even in broad daylight, and I don't talk to customers beyond what's necessary. I try to be super cautious now, but it doesn't stop me from thinking about that one time when I wasn't. My 16-year-old daughter, Anya, was on her way home from volleyball practice that Wednesday evening when a drunk driver ran a red light on her. The bystanders called the ER, but it was too late. She left a void in my heart and home that I couldn't fill no matter what. I had already lost my husband to cancer 4 years back, and there was nothing left for me in the city anymore. So I moved into the farmhouse 3 months after the funeral. It had been my aunt's before she passed and was left to me in her will. It sat on 12 acres with no neighbors for 2 miles. I set up Anya's things in the upstairs bedroom, still in boxes. I told myself I'd unpack her belongings eventually and turn her bedroom into a proper memorial, but I simply couldn't go in there without breaking down. My dog Cooper slept in my room most nights. He was a lab mix. Anya picked him out from the shelter when she was 10. About 6 weeks after I moved in, I noticed something odd. I was coming back from the grocery store around dusk when I looked up at the house and felt the curtain in Anya's window move slightly, as if someone had been standing there and ducked after seeing me. I stood in the driveway staring at it, telling myself it was the wind. Maybe I'd left a window open. But when I went inside and checked, all the windows were locked. That night, Cooper kept pacing the hallway outside my bedroom, stopping in front of Anya's closed door and growling low in his throat. I got up, put my ear against the door, and listened, but everything was exactly how it should be. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep much. Over the next 2 weeks, small things kept happening. I'd turn off the kitchen light before bed and find it on again in the morning. The television would be on a different channel than I left it. Once I found the back door unlocked, even though I was certain I'd bolted it. I called the sheriff. They came and searched the property, but didn't find anything. The officer said old houses settle, locks can be tricky, and I should consider getting an alarm system if I were worried. 3 nights later, I woke up to footsteps upstairs, moving from one side of Anya's room to the other. The floorboards creaked in a rhythm I recognized. Anya used to pace when she was stressed about a test or upset about something at school. I grabbed my phone and crept into the hallway. Cooper was already there, pressed against the wall, trembling. As I climbed the stairs slowly, the footsteps stopped, still with my heart hammering. I reached Anya's door and opened it. Inside, the room was destroyed. Anya's boxes had been opened, and clothes were scattered everywhere. Dresser drawers were pulled out with contents dumped on the floor. The volleyball was gone from the windowsill too, and crouched beside the bed, wearing one of Anya's dresses, was a child-sized figure. For a second, my heart stopped beating. I was frozen as the figure slowly looked up, darted forward, and ran right past me. So close I felt the air move. I stood there shaking for I don't know how long before I could make my legs work. I went downstairs, turned on every light, called the sheriff, and sat in the kitchen with a knife until the cops arrived. They searched the whole house top to bottom, but couldn't find anything out of place. I didn't sleep for 3 days after that. On the 4th night, I woke up to Cooper barking. I got up and found him in the hallway at the bottom of the stairs, staring upward toward Anya's room. The same small figure wearing Anya's volleyball uniform was standing in the doorway. The shorts were too big, bunched up, and held with a belt. The jersey hung past the knees. I found my voice and asked who she was, asked why she was wearing Anya's clothes. The figure took a step forward into the light from the hallway. My stomach turned. It wasn't a child. The body was small, maybe 4.5 feet tall, but the face was wrong. It was deeply lined and weathered, basically an adult face on a child-sized body. Her eyes were sunken and dark, and her mouth stretched into a thin line. She giggled, saying she wore them because the clothes fit her just fine. She said she'd been waiting for someone to bring her new things. I screamed. Cooper bolted for the front door, and I followed without stopping to grab my phone or keys or anything. I ran barefoot down the driveway in my pajamas. I made it to my car and locked the doors, sitting there shaking and watching the house. The police came again. This time, they brought machines and dogs, and found a crawlspace access panel in Anya's closet that no one had ever noticed before. Behind it was a 3-foot-high space, running the length of the upstairs. Inside, they found blankets, food wrappers, and empty water bottles. Anya's volleyball was there too, along with a collection of her clothes neatly folded in the corner. The woman had been living up there for weeks, maybe longer than that. They searched the woods for hours, checked abandoned buildings, and talked to neighbors miles away. But nobody had ever seen her. I moved out that same day, stayed in a motel while my brother helped me pack everything. I sold the farmhouse within a year for half of what it was worth. Anya's things are in storage now. I can't bring myself to go through them without thinking about that woman wearing her clothes, sleeping in that crawl space right above where I thought I was keeping Anya's memory safe. Last week, I got a call from the new owners of the farmhouse. They wanted to know if I left any of my daughter's things behind. I told them I'd taken everything. They said they'd found a volleyball in the woods behind the house. Asked if I wanted it back. I was 31 and working nights at a truck stop diner off Interstate 84. It wasn't a career, but I needed the job to survive. Jaden's dad had left when he was 2, and the child support check stopped coming 6 months later. The diner paid enough to keep the lights on and food in the fridge. It was a Tuesday in March, and I'd only had 3 tables all evening when 2 drunk oddballs stumbled in around 9. They looked to be in their 40s, had their work boots on, paired with flannel shirts. They were loud from the moment they sat down, but it wasn't the first time we were dealing with nuts. I brought them menus and water. One of them asked if I came with the meal. The other thought it was hilarious. I kept my face neutral and asked what they wanted to drink. The first one leaned back in the booth and looked me up and down slowly. He said he'd take whatever I was offering. I told them I'd give them a minute to look at the menu. Over the next 20 minutes, it got worse. Every time I walked past, one of them made nasty comments. They asked if I was single, made remarks about my body, and even blocked my path when I tried to leave their table. I kept smiling, stayed polite, and reminded myself how much I needed the job and tips for Jaden, until one of them grabbed my wrist. I was reaching across to refill the water when his hand shot out and wrapped around my arm. He pulled me closer and said I should sit down and have a drink with them. He started blabbering about things he'd do to me. I tried to yank my hand back, but he wouldn't let go. The other guy kept laughing. Tears welled up in my eyes. I was pissed and desperate. Without thinking twice, I raised my hand and slapped him hard. The sound echoed through the whole diner, and both of them went quiet. The one I'd slapped stared at me with his mouth half open as his cheek turned red. My manager, Frank, came yelling out of the kitchen. He'd seen the whole thing through the service window and threatened to call the cops if they didn't leave immediately. They walked out slowly, still looking at me. The one I'd slapped said I'd regret that. His friend laughed and said something I couldn't quite hear. Frank walked them to the door and watched them get into a pickup truck. He came back and asked if I was okay. I said I was fine, that I just wanted to finish my shift. The rest of the night passed without incident. We closed at 11. I clocked out, grabbed my purse, and walked to the parking lot to find all 4 tires on my Honda were slashed. Unfortunately, Frank had already left, so the diner was locked, and my phone showed only 8% battery. I called a tow truck. They said they can't make it for 2 hours. I asked for a cab. The dispatcher said they could send one, but it would take at least 40 minutes. I couldn't wait in the parking lot that long with only 8% battery and no lights in sight except the one flickering pole lamp by the dumpster. So I started walking towards the gas station a quarter mile down the access road. I made it maybe 300 yards when headlights slowed behind me as a pickup truck pulled onto the shoulder. And then the two oddballs from earlier got out. Without wasting a second, I bolted. I cut across the drainage ditch, right into the woods behind the truck stop. Branches whipped against my face, but I didn't stop. I could hear them behind me. One of them was yelling my name. The other one was laughing. Suddenly, my foot caught on something, a root or a rock, and I went down hard. My knee slammed into the ground and pain shot up my leg. I tried to stand and couldn't. My ankle rolled under me, and I fell again. When I put weight on my left leg, it buckled. Something was broken or badly sprained. I crawled forward on my hands and knees and pulled myself deeper into the woods. My phone had fallen somewhere behind me. I could see the glow of the flashlight they were using, sweeping back and forth between the trees. Luckily, I found a fallen log and wedged myself behind it. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep quiet. My breath was coming in short gasps I couldn't control. The flashlight beam passed over the log and kept moving. They were maybe 20 feet away. I could hear them talking to each other, arguing about which direction I'd gone. One of them said I couldn't have gotten far. I stayed completely still. My leg was throbbing. I could feel something warm running down my shin, probably blood from where I'd hit the ground. They searched for what felt like hours. Their voices got farther away before they'd be closer again. At one point, one of them stood so close to the log I could smell cigarette smoke. Eventually, their voices faded. I heard a truck door slam in the distance and the engine humming away. I still waited another 30 minutes before I pulled myself upright using the log and started limping back toward the road. I found my phone in the dirt. The screen was cracked, but it was still working. It still had 2% battery. I called 911 and whispered my location. The dispatcher kept me on the line until the ambulance arrived. They found me sitting against a tree about 50 yards from the truck stop, covered in mud and blood. My leg was fractured in 2 places. They kept me in the hospital overnight for observation. The police took my statement the next morning. I gave them descriptions and told them about the truck. They said they'd look into it, but without plates, there wasn't much they could do. I quit the diner the day I got out of the hospital, told Frank over the phone. He said he understood and that he was sorry. One of my friends helped me get a remote job 3 weeks later at a call center. So I work from home now and avoid going after dark anymore. Jaden is only 5, but way more mature than kids his age. Maybe he couldn't get the whole story, but he knows his mommy survived something horrible. Over time, he may forget it, but I know I won't. I bought the house in May, right after I got the promotion at work. It was a small 2-bedroom in a quiet suburban neighborhood where everyone minded their own business. The price was reasonable. The inspection came back clean, and I could finally afford to live alone. The neighbor to my right, Mr. Henry, seemed normal enough at first. I saw him once during the walkthrough. He was an older man in his 50s working in his garden. He waved and I waved back. I moved in on a Saturday and spent the weekend unpacking boxes and arranging furniture. Sunday evening, I was carrying the last load in from my car when I noticed him standing at his upstairs window, looking down at me. I figured he was just curious about the new neighbor. But over the next week, I started noticing a pattern. Every time I came home from work, he'd be at that same window, standing still as a statue, peering down at me. I mentioned it to my coworker, Diane. She said old people get bored and that he probably didn't mean anything by it. I tried to believe that. 3 weeks in, I was taking a shower before bed. It was around 10:30, and I had the bathroom window cracked to let out the steam. The window was frosted glass, high enough that nobody could see in unless they were standing on something. I was rinsing shampoo out of my hair when I saw a bright flash of light through the frosted glass. I froze for a second before I turned off the water and wrapped a towel around myself. My hands were shaking. I killed the bathroom light and stood in the dark, trying to listen over the sound of my heartbeat. I could hear shuffling outside before hurried footsteps seemed to move away toward the fence line. I went to my bedroom window that faced his yard. In the dim light from his porch, I saw a shadow moving back toward his house. I didn't sleep that night, kept every light on and checked the locks on all the windows and doors at least a dozen times. The next morning, I called the police and told them what happened. They sent an officer out who took a report and said they talked to my neighbor. But without proof, it was difficult to do anything. He suggested I install curtains in all my windows and maybe get some motion sensor lights. I did both that same day, but it didn't stop. My dog Bailey started acting strange. She was a golden retriever and friendly with everyone, but she started barking in my bedroom window every night around midnight. She was pretty aggressive in a way I'd never seen before. One night, I looked out and saw fresh cigarette butts by my back fence. I don't smoke, nor do any of my friends who visited. The realization that someone could be lurking around my house made me paranoid. I started closing all my curtains before it got dark, stopped going outside after sunset, and toggled with my routine so I wasn't coming home at the same time every day. That Tuesday night, I'd gone to bed around 11. Bailey was on the floor beside me, already asleep. I was just starting to drift off when she bolted upright and started barking at the window. I sat up and listened. The house was quiet except for Bailey. I was about to tell her to settle down when I heard the sound of my bedroom window sliding open. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The window was open about 6 inches. As I watched, a hand reached through the gap and pushed it higher. Suddenly, his face flashed me a grin as he started pulling himself through. I screamed, grabbed the lamp from my nightstand, and swung it as hard as I could. It connected with the side of his head. Mr. Henry made a sound between a grunt and a gasp and fell backward. His body hung there for a second before he pulled himself free and dropped to the ground outside. I heard him running. Bailey was going insane, barking and throwing herself at the window. I called 911, told them my neighbor had tried to break into my house. They arrived in less than 5 minutes. When they went to his house, Mr. Henry answered the door like nothing had happened, claimed he'd been asleep the whole time, but I could see the blood on his temple where the lamp had hit him. The officers asked if they could search his house. He refused at first. Then his lawyer showed up and advised him to cooperate. They found 100 of my photos in his bedroom closet. Some of them were taken while I was showering or changing. He drilled a tiny hole in my fence and installed a small camera pointing at my back door. They found 2 more cameras in the bushes near my house. He was arrested that night. The trial took 8 months. His lawyer tried to argue he was just a lonely old man who developed an inappropriate fixation. The prosecutor showed the jury photos, the cameras, and the evidence of him tampering with my window lock. He got 4 years. I sold the house before he was even sentenced. Couldn't stay there another night. I live in an apartment now, on the 3rd floor, facing an open parking lot where I can see anyone approaching. I still check all my locks 3 times before bed and close every curtain the second the sun goes down. I lost Bailey last year to heart failure. Sometimes I look up his name online just to make sure he's not living near me. The registry shows an address 40 miles away, but I don't trust it. I think about those photos a lot. The ones they showed in court were just a fraction of what they found. The detective told me there were over 1,000 images. He'd been watching me from the moment I moved in, and I wonder how long he'd been planning to climb through that window. If that was the first time he tried, or just the first time someone had woken up. I was 17 when I started working at Crossroads Diner. It sat on Highway 81 in the middle of nowhere upstate. My shift was 5 to midnight on weekends, which meant I was usually alone up front while Hector worked in the kitchen. It was a Thursday in November when the man walked in around 9:30, right after the dinner rush had died down. He was thin, maybe mid-40s, and wore khakis and a plain blue sweater. His hair was neatly combed. He looked like a substitute teacher or an accountant at best. He settled in booth 7, the last one near the bathrooms, and ordered 2 bottles of water. I brought it to him with silverware wrapped in a paper napkin. He thanked me and pulled out a small notebook with graph paper inside. He started writing numbers in neat columns. By then, I'd encountered plenty of weirdos, so I simply went back to work but kept an eye on him. An hour passed, but instead of ordering food, he sat there, writing and occasionally sipping his water. Every few minutes, he'd glance up at me and would immediately look away the moment our eyes met. Around 10:30, I went over and asked if he wanted to order anything. He looked up with a small smile and said he was fine. He took a pause before he added my name. I froze. My name tag had fallen off 2 days ago, and I hadn't gotten a replacement yet, and didn't remember introducing myself. He must have seen the confusion on my face because he gestured toward the schedule board near the kitchen, said he noticed it earlier. That made sense. The board listed everyone's shifts with their first names. I relaxed a little and told him to let me know if he needed anything. He nodded and went back to his notebook. By 11:30, I started cleaning up for closing. The man was still there, scribbling stuff. I wiped down the other booths and refilled napkin dispensers, trying to work my way toward him without being obvious about it. He finally stood up around 11:45 and asked where the bathroom was. I pointed down the hall. He walked back there and I heard the door close. 10 minutes passed, but he didn't show up. I glanced at the clock. It was almost midnight. Hector was finishing in the kitchen, and I wanted to lock up and get out. I walked down the hallway and knocked on the bathroom door, calling out to ask if everything was okay, but the stalls might have been empty. I knocked harder, but again, got no answer. I tried the handle. The door opened, and the bathroom was really empty. I looked around and noticed the window above the toilet was unlatched, pushed open wide enough for a thin person to squeeze through. The screen was gone. I backed out of the bathroom, visibly shaken. My heartbeats picked up. I went to tell Hector, but he'd already left through the kitchen entrance. I was alone. I locked the front door, turned off most of the lights, and went back to the office to grab my jacket. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. "You should lock the back door first. That's where they usually come in." My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen and read it again as another text came through. "You took 4 minutes and 23 seconds to close last Tuesday. Tonight you were faster." I ran to the back door. It was still unlocked, exactly how Hector had left it when he went to his car. I slammed the deadbolt and backed away from it. My phone buzzed again. Good. I looked out the kitchen window toward the parking lot. Headlights flicked on across the highway, but maybe 200 yards away, a dark sedan was parked on the shoulder with the engine running. The man was standing beside it with his notebook in his hand. He was looking directly at the diner. He raised his hand slowly, held up 3 fingers, and pointed at me. I dropped below the window and dialed 911. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. The dispatcher answered, and I tried to explain what was happening. She said officers were on the way, that I should stay inside and keep the doors locked. I stayed on the floor behind the counter, watching the front door. Every few seconds, I'd peek up at the window. The headlights were still there. 2 patrol cars pulled in some 15 minutes later. I watched the officers get out and look around. One of them crossed the highway toward where the sedan had been parked, but it was gone. I don't know when he left. I'd stopped looking after the 5th minute, too afraid he'd somehow gotten closer. The officers came inside and took my statement. I showed them the text. One of them asked if I noticed anyone suspicious before tonight. I said no. He asked if I was sure and insisted that I really think about it. I did, and remembered how last week, maybe the week before, I'd seen someone sitting in booth 7 late at night. I couldn't remember their face, but I remember thinking it was weird they'd only ordered water. The officer asked if I had security footage. I told him the cameras hadn't worked in months, that the owner kept saying he'd fix them but never did. They stayed until my mom came to pick me up, told me to call if anything else happened. I quit the next day, told my mom I wanted to focus on school. She didn't argue. 2 weeks after that, I was at the grocery store with friends when I saw him in the cereal aisle, wearing the same blue sweater, holding a box of cornflakes. When he saw me looking, he smiled and gave me a little wave. I left my cart and walked straight out. My friends asked what was wrong. I told them I'd seen someone I used to know. That night I got another text. "You're faster at the grocery store too. 11 minutes from entrance to exit. Last time was 19. Efficient as ever, Noah." I was 12 when we moved into the house on Palm Street. My parents got it cheap at an auction, and we were excited about the deal until the realtor mentioned why the price was so low. The previous owner, Carlos, had been found dead in the attic where he'd apparently been hiding to escape his attackers. The police report claimed it to be a home invasion gone wrong, but they never caught the real culprits. My mom wanted to back out immediately, but Dad said a good deal was a good deal regardless. We moved in on a Sunday in August. I picked the bedroom on the second floor. It was directly beneath the attic access and was the biggest room in the house, with windows on 2 walls and enough space for my desk and bookshelves. The attic entrance was a pull-down ladder in the hallway ceiling just outside my door. The first week was normal. I set up my room, started at the new school, and tried to make friends. The house was old and creaky, but that didn't bother me until the footsteps started, moving back and forth above my ceiling. I'd hear them at night, usually around 2 or 3 in the morning. At first I thought it was my parents up there, but when I asked them about it the next morning, they seemed pretty much clueless. My dad went up to check but found nothing except for some old insulation and boxes that the previous owner had left behind. He reassured me that it was probably just the house settling, or animals in the walls, but the footsteps didn't sound like settling. On the 4th night, I noticed a chemical smell like fireworks coming with the footsteps. It would drift down through the ceiling and fill my room until I had to open a window. I mentioned it to my parents again. My dad said old houses had weird smells, that it was probably just dust or mildew. He checked the attic again when he had time. 2 weeks in, I decided to handle it myself. I was tired of being scared and lying awake. I figured if it was an animal, I could scare it off. And if it were something else, at least I'd know. That night, I stayed awake with my door cracked open, waiting for the sound or smell. Right at 2:15 in the morning, the movement started. I grabbed my phone for the flashlight and pulled down the attic ladder as quietly as I could. The smell nearly knocked me out. It was so strong I had to cover my nose with my shirt. I climbed the ladder slowly. My palms were sweaty, and my heart was pounding. The attic was dark except the light from my phone. I could see exposed beams, pink insulation, and cardboard boxes stacked in the corner. The footsteps had stopped. Instead, a wet choking filled the space. It was coming from the far corner, past the boxes. I moved the light toward the sound, but could hardly see anything except dust floating and some shadows. Suddenly, I noticed legs lying on the floor in the corner, half hidden behind a support beam. As I crept closer, I could see a torso and an arm stretched out. My phone light shook in my hand. The man was on his back, wearing a white shirt that was dark and wet across the chest. His mouth was open. Blood was trickling from the corner, running down their neck and pooling on the wooden floor. Their eyes were open, and they were staring directly at me. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Just then, they blinked. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping my phone. The figure on the floor made that choking sound again. Their chests heaved like they were trying to breathe. I watched in horror as their fingers twitched against the wood. Their mouths stretched into a sick smile, and blood bubbled between their teeth. I screamed and ran for the ladder, fell down the last 3 rungs, and hit the hallway floor hard. My dad's bedroom door flew open, and he came running out asking what was wrong. I pointed up at the attic, trying to get words out. Told him there was someone up there and they were dying. My dad climbed up with his own flashlight. I heard him moving around up there, opening boxes and checking behind the beams. He came back down 5 minutes later, said the attic was empty. I insisted I'd seen someone, described exactly where they'd been lying, what they looked like. My dad said I'd had a nightmare, that I'd probably been sleepwalking, and told me to go back to bed. The next morning, I asked the kid next door about the house. He was a few years older than me, and had lived on the street his whole life. He said Carlos had been running some kind of illegal operation out of the attic. When it went bad, he tried to hide up there. The people who came for him found him anyway. They shot him 7 times in the chest and left him there to bleed out. It took 3 days before anyone found the body. I asked if they ever caught who did it. He said the case went cold after a few months. That night, the footsteps started again. But this time, I didn't go up to check. I put headphones in and turned my music up loud enough to drown them out. I didn't go near the attic after that. I didn't even like walking past the ladder in the hallway, because sometimes, late at night, I could still smell the gunpowder seeping through the ceiling. And sometimes, I heard that wet choking sound mixed in with the footsteps. The moment I turned 18, I moved out of the house. I told my parents I wanted to be closer to college, even though I'm only going to community school 20 minutes away. My parents still live in that house. They think I'm being dramatic, but I know what I saw up there. And it isn't an animal or the house settling. It's Carlos, dying the same painful death every single night.